10-person wilderness survival challenge. The last person standing wins $500,000. These 10 folks came to Vancouver Island all pumped up. It's gorgeous here. But with beauty often comes danger. Desmond drew a pretty sweet spot. No worries about water here. First thing, he plans to set up a safe shelter. Then, it's off to find some food. His thoughts are clear, his goals are sharp. Way to go, young man. The deeper into the dense, damp forest, the creepier it gets. Bear poop starts appearing on the ground. That got Desmond feeling all jittery. He takes a moment to steady himself and decides to push further in. After all, he's been a soldier for 7 years. Getting scared off by some poop? That'd be ridiculous. He joined the show to brag a bit, even boasted about it to friends and family.
If somebody see the bear fight, they need to help the bear.
Right.
Seems like he might be eating his words a bit sooner than expected. And there's another pile of bear poop, still steaming. Now he's really not feeling calm. Keeps moving, hoping to find a safer spot. But the deeper he goes, the more bear poop he finds. To avoid attracting the bear, he hangs his food up high. Then there's Mary, the female contestant. Stepped off the plane and somehow ended up soaked. She needs to find a spot to camp and make a fire, fast. She quickly picks a prime spot and gets to work. Being a mom, Mary can't help but miss her kids, especially her 2 adorable daughters, one a little fairy, the other a little angel. She herself is a hero in an elite firefighting squad. She's on this show to push her limits and set an example for her girls. She throws together a simple frame, covers it with waterproof material, and voila, a makeshift tent. But it's a bit small, and there's a lot of tarp left over, just enough to lay on the ground to keep out the damp. Back to Desmond, he's getting more panicked the more he walks. Feels like bears are everywhere. Suddenly, he hears a weird noise. To boost his courage and maybe scare off any bears, he yells a few times into the bushes. Trembling, he moves ahead. Finally, he circles back to the river. He just can't stay in the woods anymore. Now, Desmond can't focus on anything. His mind's full of bear shadows, and every little rustle makes him jump. Hope this guy doesn't end up bailing because of fear. By the lake, Tracy, our hefty contender, effortlessly yanked out an annoying tree with her bare hands. She's a former military and law enforcement officer, so her shooting skills are top-notch. She's a big meat lover, blessed with both a son and a daughter, and even has a dog she adores. Tired of the easy life, she's now on a quest for a deeper spiritual journey, looking to explore her inner self. In no time, Tracy sets up a temporary tent, and that's where she'll crash tonight. Then there's Larry, clean-shaven and only 44, but he's already ticked off the major life milestones. His son, tall and handsome, has graduated from college, and his daughter, both sweet and graceful, stands tall. He's been happily married to his loving and gentle wife for 26 years. For those still being nagged to get married in their 30s, wouldn't you envy him? Bored of the blissful routine, he's decided to step away from the mundane to live a life less ordinary. Right now, Larry is scouting for a place to settle down for the night. The area is dense with bushes, and finding flat ground isn't easy. After some surveying and evaluating, he chooses a cedar by the river to sleep under tonight. After setting up his tent, Larry admits to the camera that he made a stupid mistake, though it's hard to see what went wrong. Can any pros out there explain? He heads upstream, hoping to find a better spot, but then it starts raining. The fog rolls in, blanketing the forest and severely reducing visibility. The ground turns exceptionally slippery, and despite using his axe to climb, Larry still ends up slipping. A tree branch then pokes him in the eye, and he starts to lose his cool.
I hate this place.
Who would have thought this guy, all prim and proper on the outside, had such a wild side? The next day, Tracy arrives at a spot full of mussels, her absolute favorite. There's enough here to last her half a year, but hands in pockets, she sighs. Turns out, before coming here, the showrunners had informed them that due to red tide, these shellfish were carrying a lot of viruses and weren't safe to eat. So close yet so far, it's just heartbreaking. All she can do is swallow her disappointment and walk away. Meanwhile, Larry is still fretting over his tent. He wants to make a pear-shaped tent and has been looking for a flat spot. He's now cut down a tree to use as the main sloping pole, laid out the tarp, and is setting up some stakes to keep the tarp taut. This setup should just about get him through the night. Once that's done, he finally takes a moment to appreciate the scenery. Desmond sat by the river, zoning out all afternoon. His mind was completely blank, his willpower shattered. He knew what he had to do now. Yep, it was time to head home. The crew was in total shock. "Is this your idea of a half-day tour on Vancouver Island?" Although he wanted to be a man who saw things through, the bear poop scared the life out of him. He never actually saw a bear, but the fear of the unknown took over. And just like that, the first contestant was sent home. It all happened so fast. Come evening, Tracy was sitting in her tent by the fire. She heard some odd noises and grabbed an axe for courage. Lying in her sleeping bag, she managed a strained smile. The sound of the rain mixed with other bizarre noises, and it seemed something flashed by. Tracy, flashlight in hand, started searching around cautiously. At night, you really have to watch out for cougar attacks, especially for someone of her size. Running away was practically impossible. All she could hope was that the cougar wasn't into fatty food. Mary was also disturbed by the rain, but she was a lot more optimistic, except her boots were still wet, which annoyed her. She finally got up, put on her clothes, and discovered her tent was leaking. Everything was soaked, her bag, her sleeping bag. She collapsed in a corner, questioning her life choices. The next morning, Mary began cleaning up the mess. Everything was damp, and it sure didn't lift her spirits. But she quickly adjusted her attitude and started building an A-frame structure, which would drain well. She laid out the tarp on the ground to keep dry. Finding dry firewood in a tropical rainforest isn't easy, and Larry was stressing over it. After a lot of effort, he only managed to gather a small handful of damp wood. Back at camp, he tried to start a fire with a flint, rubbing his hands together, worried about his shelter. If the river rose, his home would be flooded, and he'd need to find a new place to stay. It got dark quickly, and he said there were 2 bears outside the tent. He went out with a light.
Get out of here! Get out of here! Get out of here!
And though I saw nothing, he insisted they were there. At least he wasn't backing down because of fear. This guy in big shorts is Justin. He spent 15 years in the military, even went to war, and had just recently left. Many struggle with their mental state after leaving the military, and he had a plan: take everyone on hiking trips. He believed that connecting with nature could heal the emptiness inside. Military life was all about teamwork, but this time, he was going it alone, a whole new challenge. Now he headed into the woods to look for food. A duck appeared by the lake, and he chose to let it go, apparently not hungry enough yet. On day 5, Mary woke from a daze. She thought she heard her child calling out for her. Looking around, there was no daughter, no breakfast, just a bird and the pattering rain. All of it snapped her back to reality. She's setting up a barrier to keep the rain out and get a fire going. Mary just got on with it, axe in hand and out the door. She's got that gypsy blood in her veins. That's where her courage comes from. She chopped notches, built the frame, then covered it with a tarp. Being meticulous, she also gathered stones and made a ring around the area for fire protection, effectively separating her kitchen from her sleeping area. But it makes me wonder how she'll keep warm in the winter. This guy, David, looks mad, but he's not really. He just has a fierce look. He's a divorced dad with 3 kids. He wanted his kids to experience using moss instead of toilet paper. But that was just his wishful thinking. Over the past few years, he's been through divorce, moving, and other life changes. His kids are really supportive of him joining this competition. That's where he draws his strength and faith from. He thinks he could live here till he starves. He went down to the river to try fishing. David tied a rope to a tree, spaced out several fishing lines along it, each with its own hook, an automatic fishing trap all set. He's pretty confident in his skills. Now, all he has to do is wait. This man is setting traps, simple ones for catching mice and rabbits, and another deadly one for prey as big as a bear. He explained for a while.
Gotta loop around there. The way to the rock will be here. So the rock will be pressing down on this, and then there'll be a bait stick, which is running from your toggle to the end of the rock, or the end of the log, or whatever you have. So what will happen is the creature will come up, pick off that bait stick. That'll cause the trap to trigger, and then the rock to fall and collapse on the animal. So it's actually a very humane way to kill it.
And I didn't quite get it, but he couldn't find the right rocks during the setup and had to use a 300-pound log instead. After setting it up, he brewed a cup of Iron Mountain tea, rich in vitamin C, good for soothing sore throats and coughs, perfect to cool him down. This long-haired, handsome guy is Randy. This is his photo without a beard. Just one look and you're smitten, right? No daydreaming, he's got a son. He works at a wilderness survival school, and now's a good time to put his skills to the test. The female contestant, Nicole, seems in good spirits. She wants to take everyone around for a walk, starting with a beach stroll on Vancouver Island, a place that makes her feel at home. She lives in Oregon, and the longest she's been away from her 2 kids was 7 weeks, which she found extremely tough. But her son said it was quite relaxing without mom around. She's a primitive skills instructor, skilled in botany and making tinctures. She has multiple sclerosis and was once unable to walk. Medication didn't help for years, but she cured herself with herbal remedies, so she's deeply grateful to nature. She joined the show for another reason too. 2 years ago, her foster son drowned in the Atlantic, right where she's challenging herself now. She's not quite sure why she's competing, maybe to inspire the kids. Nicole's shelter isn't finished yet. It still needs a lot of support and debris to cover the roof to ensure it stays warm inside. While working, she heard birds chirping. Nicole is a real-life level 12 bird language expert. Just by listening to the birds, she can tell where there might be snakes, cheetahs, lions, and other animals. Birds are her detection radar. With such a powerful natural skill, isn't she just booking her way to the championship? Mary's still tweaking her shelter on the other side. She strung a stick across the A-frame and hung some ferns to craft a simple door. Then, she rigged up a tripod to keep the door off the ground and away from the mud. After finishing, Mary did a little victory dance, moved in to try it out, and it wasn't too shabby. She could even see outside. When she woke up in the morning, she greeted her daughter's photos with "Ah, good morning" before starting a fire to boil water. The new barrier worked like a charm, and the fire was going strong in no time, though it needed a bit more wood. Grabbing the axe, Mary started chopping, but maybe she was too homesick and distracted, because on the 3rd chop, down came the axe on her own hand. Her thumb wouldn't lift, trembling from the pain. Injuries can easily get infected in the wild. Will this make her drop out of the competition? The 6th contestant is Bearded Mike, a pilot and wilderness survival instructor. First, let's check out his breakfast. He's collected various seaweeds laid out on a stump. This one, similar to green onions, is super sweet, and the roots of this seaweed are edible too. This kelp with a tail crunches loudly when bitten, though it's a bit salty. Now that the tide is out, he's off to hang his gill net. The creek flows into the bay where he's placed his net just right, hoping the tide changes will bring him a catch. But for now, it seems more like a good time for a tennis match. Meanwhile, Mike keeps foraging. Besides seaweed, he finds long, steaming bear droppings, exciting him because he finally has food, which makes Desmond, who was scared off by a bear, feel even worse. Justin is even more daring than Mike, just strutting around the woods in his underwear. He hasn't found any food, nor spotted any bears or rabbits. At the riverbank, he discovered a duck, dead without any bite marks or blood, leading him to suspect it was poisoned. That makes the meat inedible. Justin was really frustrated about it. Meat right there. But he can't eat it. Puffing up his cheeks like a pufferfish, he finally decided to throw the duck into the sea in frustration. Randy found his trap triggered, but no prey caught. Since arriving on the island, he's been eating mushrooms and hasn't had any meat. He figures if he can't catch anything on land, he better get ready to cast nets for fishing. Just as he was about to start a fire, he couldn't find his flint anywhere. It reminded me of Sean from season 7, who had to quit after losing his flint, but I still had faith in him. The way he searched for things was pretty sophisticated, not just randomly rummaging around, but going back through the video footage. Sure enough, he found where the flint had gone. It had rolled into the fire pit and, sadly, was already burnt up. Now, he could only look for materials to start a fire by friction, but it was so damp here that it made starting a fire even harder. Randy spent half the day getting everything ready. After carving a notch in a wooden board with his knife, he started rubbing it non-stop. Last season, someone lost their flint, and he even mocked them for making such a rookie mistake. Now, the tables have turned, and how? He rubbed away for ages, but all we saw was smoke. No fire. He blamed the ineffective pumice stone and figured he needed to find a better rock. I was really worried this guy might just fail to make fire and drop out. By day 7 of the survival challenge, while others were still worried about food, Mike had already started storing up. Early in the morning, Mike went to check his fishing net and from a distance saw a fish. Upon pulling up the net, he found 3 fish instead of 1. He decided not to eat them all at once, but to cook and bury them. Eating the fish reminded him of his wife, Barbara. Mike had been an orphan since childhood, and his wife filled that emotional void. Now he had 3 kids and 3 grandkids, but he had lost his daughter a few years back. Those painful memories and heartbreaking experiences were bearable with his wife by his side, but now he faced them alone. He dug a hole in the ground, placed the cooked fish inside, and buried them in a way that would protect them from light and oxygen damage. He covered them with seaweed to mask the smell and then buried them with sand. If the temperature stayed low enough, the fish could last 2 days, provided a bear didn't find them. After handling all this, he took a walk by the river. Tracy also took out her fishing net today. She decided to use it to catch fish, hanging it on a branch and carefully placing it in the water.
Hey, hey, hey! Go away!
It scared me for a second. I thought a bear was coming. But after looking around for a long while, there was nothing. Well, she said she was just rehearsing. If a predator came, she'd have to shout like that. She also said that she wasn't as afraid of bears and wolves as she was of the silently lurking cougars. After setting the net, she left full of hope. Randy's got 2 choices in front of him: either throw in the towel and head home, or put in the effort to adapt and overcome the challenges. He found a rock with a little indentation, which might just be the key to unlocking success. Back at camp, he started trying to make fire again. He felt like he was going insane.
Holy shit, I got one.
Lying on the ground, blowing gently into the embers, carefully pouring them into the fire pit, holding them in his hands and blowing lightly. Finally, he sparked a flame of hope. But thinking about the long, painful process he'd have to go through every time he needed to start a fire, he just hoped this fire would never go out. Meanwhile, Mike's feeling off, his heart suddenly uncomfortable. He thinks it might be a bit of homesickness, or maybe he's just really missing his wife. He can't sleep, sits up, and stares into the starry sky, missing his wife dearly. I'm starting to wonder if this guy might just head home soon. Tracy finally got to eat some decent food. As the tide went out, she couldn't wait to get to the shore to check her nets. Lucky day, 2 for the price of 1, a crab and a fish. She quickly prepped both and threw them into the pot. The cameras cut to her enjoying the meal. Eating meat for the first time here really tasted like happiness. Tracy says she's not here to push her limits. She knows where her limits are. She started recalling some tough times. Back in July 1997, after a busy day on the road, she heard about a shooting on the radio. She hesitated for a few seconds, but decided to head to the scene. By the time she arrived, it was too late. She regretted her hesitation and has gone to sleep with guilt every night since. Tonight seems to be another sleepless night. She heard a bear during her morning rehearsal, and now it was coming in handy. Tracy then heard the sound of snapping branches and gave the bear a final warning.
Get on out of here! Get! You heard me, get!
Then she heard clear snorting. Clutching her bear spray, she couldn't dare sleep. Instead, she got up, saw a pair of shining eyes in the dark, and started yelling at it. Turns out it was just a bear cub trying to get close. She set off a firework at the bear, and luckily, it got scared off. Jose took out his digging stick. Living by the Yukon River, he likes to view the world through indigenous eyes. He makes his own clothes from animal hides and teaches survival skills to others. This time, he's really putting his skills to the test. He's not too worried about his son. His biggest concern is his wife, Shauna. He hopes she can keep things together while he's away. He doesn't want to boast, as he believes having humility can save one from embarrassment. Sounds a bit like he's talking about Desmond from the last episode who had to drop out. Now, he's digging up spruce roots, which make excellent rope. He peels the bark with his fingernails and soaks them in water to keep them flexible. Next, he's making a bellows. He hollows out a piece of wood, opens a small hole at the front, and fits two together like this. He takes out the spruce roots soaked in water, ties them up, and just like that, a bellows is ready. When the fire's about to go out, all he has to do is blow like this.
It really revives fires.
He said this thing could also be used as a musical instrument when he's bored. Having a bit of music in the woods isn't too bad, although all I heard was some puffing sounds.
Ooh, clouds pour their potion.
Speaking of music, hers was more pleasing to the ears. Nicole was singing while perfecting her shelter when suddenly she heard a strange noise. She dropped what she was doing and followed the sound, only to see a black bear across the bay. Nicole quickly snapped a few close-ups of it. She is eating something called sea asparagus, which she guessed the bear might be eating too. Everyone was eating their greens, minding their own business, just as she had hoped. David went to check the catch in his fishing traps, hoping for a good result. Pulling up the line, he found a big bundle of seaweed. Looks like he needed to fix the line. He was quite disappointed, and right on cue, it started to rain. It was day 7.
I can't lift my thumb, I can't lift my thumb, I can't lift my thumb, mother.
The tape recorder of this scenario was Mary. Her hands were trembling and bleeding. Don't think it's a minor issue. A severed radial artery can lead to permanent loss of hand function within 4 to 6 hours. Trembling, she unzipped the emergency pack, pulled out the GPS, a standard issue for all contestants to contact rescue teams when necessary. She pressed the button to initiate an emergency response. Blood kept flowing from her hand, and the rescue team was slow to arrive. She pressed the button a few more times and added a voice announcement. Then she treated the wound herself until the rescue team finally showed. From a distance, they signaled for Mary to raise her hand. The wound was deep, about an inch long, and her hand was numb but cold. Seeing the blood-soaked gauze on the ground made her hand hurt even more. Finally, assisted by medical staff, she ended her contest. On the boat, she pursed her lips, feeling a bit like crying. She had never imagined she would leave the competition like this, injured by her own axe. The more she thought about it, the more foolish it seemed. But that's life. You can't predict or redo it. Larry might have heard about Mary getting injured and leaving the competition because of her own axe. At that moment, he was installing a protective cover on his axe. Speaking to the camera, he reflected a lot, like how tough the journey was and how there wasn't even a hint of a path. He ended up talking too much and got thirsty. Thankfully, the heavens weren't too unkind. His thirst brought some rain, but the noisy river was disturbing his peace, so he decided to move. He found 2 cedar trees snapped in half and hoped this would be his new shelter. He started sawing wood for stakes and found another 2 logs for the frame. The slippery ground even caused him to fall. The survival challenge reached day 7, and 2 contestants had already been eliminated. Guess who might be next? The $1 million survival challenge had the quirkiest reason for dropping out ever: fearing to scare a baby bear. This time, the Wilderness Survival Challenge was set in a forest known for grizzly bear sightings, where an encounter with a bear was highly likely.
Get the hell out of here. I see you. Get out of here.
Looks like even bears are scared of the cops, got scared off by Tracy's fierceness. Encountering 2 bears in one night, this lady couldn't keep her cool. Think she was crying out of fear? Think smaller. She was just mortified that the camera caught her fierce moment. Her well-maintained ladylike image completely shattered. Really, it was too embarrassing to watch. Tracy couldn't help but sob, covering her face. That was a bit too sudden, huh? The crew was pretty baffled picking her up.
When I saw the little bear, it was just this feeling of remorse hit me for being so aggressive over it, because that's the way I've always been. I've just been uber aggressive, and I just felt really bad.
Clearly scared off, but still claiming it so boldly. Well, all I can say is safe travels. Mike dreamed last night that his wife Barbara was kissing him, and he passionately responded. Waking up to find it was a slug on his lips, thinking about kissing a slug all night, he felt he'd never shake off that mental image. Maybe keeping busy would help him forget sooner. In the damp rainforest, life is always especially tough. Mike was setting up a drying rack over the fire, hammering 4 stakes into the ground, tying sticks on the sides, and laying 2 more across the top to dry the firewood. With his mild OCD, his wood chopping is different from others, sorting the wood by length and thickness, arranged neatly. Such a meticulous guy, he also hates squatting down to make fire, decided to build a stove 1 meter high. He says he'll stick it out here for a year. In no time, Mike had hammered in the 4 stakes, tied up the beams, and placed the cut planks on top. A stove was built. Then he spread sand and stones collected from the beach on top to insulate against the heat, preventing the table from burning. Now it's time to witness a miracle. Bored, he even made a pedal-operated running water tap from collected trash. First, he fixed a plastic barrel to a tree with a stick, found a longer stick to tie to the barrel, attached a rope to the end, looped it over a branch, and tied it to a pedal. Making full use of the lever principle, a step on the pedal gets the water flowing. Not pretty, but very practical. Looks like his talk of staying a year wasn't just talk. Stove, drying rack, kitchen, running water, fully equipped. Truly achieved wilderness modernization. This guy's got something, huh? He feels all he's missing is bringing his wife over. Larry finally caught a fish, couldn't wait for the tide to go out, wanted to pull in the net. Though it was just a small fish, he was really too hungry. But as he pulled, the fish slipped away. He really regretted not waiting for the tide, hunger overwhelming his brain, sick of eating the same old sea snails. Finally, when the tide was out, he checked the net again, found a fish struggling on it. Learning from the morning's lesson, he knocked the fish out before comfortably lifting it. Turning his head, he spotted another. Happiness came so suddenly. Larry cried tears of joy, then caught another fish on his rod. He was over the moon, shouting by the riverbank.
Good sir. Hello, good sir. Another deuce. Another double.
David wasn't so lucky. He'd been starving for days, dreaming of fried chicken and burritos, his top cravings. If he could order, he'd go for 4 pieces of original recipe chicken with fries and a Coke. Perfect. But there's nothing around here. I didn't get why he was digging in the rock cracks for food. After fumbling around, he collapsed from hunger, not even knowing what day it was. He got up to check the fishing net by the river. Empty. Seems like a waste of money on that net, with only the wind laughing at him through its whispers. Larry was also pinning his hopes on fishing. He cast a net and even put down a fishing rod, but caught nothing. He decided to make a spear for fishing at low tide. After a lot of cutting and fixing, he finally made it. One end a spear for large animals, and the other forked for fishing. It looked pretty legit, but who knows how well it'll work. David brought a fishing net with him, but it hadn't seen much action these past few days. So he decided to make another one to boost his chances of catching fish. After carving a shuttle from cedar, he started a net-making tutorial.
The first step of the process is to tie a series of loops all the way down the net, and then I'm going to come back and start netting to them, back and forth, switching sides on the net, back and forth, just going and going. To tie the knots, you have to pass the entire ball of string through the loops, and that's what the net needle is all about. It holds all the string you're working with and allows you to pass the giant coil of string through the knot.
Hungry and thinking of fried chicken, he quickly ran out of fishing line. Now he needs to find more.